Guys, my name is Clement from the Tech, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys all about socketio. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel because that really helps. Now without any further ado, let's get on with the video. Okay, so this is what we're gonna make. It's a regular chat group that keeps track of the users that are connected to our app, and this is just a modal that requires the user to enter their username as they enter the app, or they can progress. So for this username, I'm just gonna write my name, Clement, and click submit. And as you can see, when I set Clement as a name and click submit, it added me as an active user, and I can freely chat here. I can just say, hey guys, here, press enter, and you can see that I have my username here as the person that initiated this um, message on the group, and the message here called hey guys. I can come here and add a username to this person, say Joe, press enter. You can see that Joe is added to the list of active users, and I can come here and say um, hi friends, and you can see that Joe is now the person that commented here, and I can come over here and say Sarah and press enter, and now Sarah has been added to the list of active users, and again Sarah can then say hey my friends. So we all get the point of this setup. It's like a group for multi people to join and communicate real time, and this can be achieved using socketio, and that is exactly what I'm going to show you guys how to do in this video. So if you want to get to this point, let's keep watching, and let's start with the code. So let me just close out this processes. So as you can see, as I closed out the first two processes, the users also left the active user list, and now this is only Sarah that's here. Those users are no longer active, so it keeps track of when a user disappears and when a user appears. So that is pretty cool as well. So let's get on with the video. So before I start writing the code and stuff, let's talk about what socketio is exactly. Basically, socketio is a relatively new technology. It's not super new, but it came out about 4 or 5 years ago. I can't quite remember, but it's a tool that enables bidirectional communication between the client and the server. So prior to this, the client, which is our browser, needed to constantly poll the server, meaning sending get and post requests for the server, for any new changes to say a database or some sort of file system. So that we needed to constantly poll, which means sending get or post requests to the server to get new data. But then socketio made it so that that doesn't need to happen anymore. There's this constant socket that enables real-time bidirectional event-based communication between the server and the client, so that both the server and the client can send messages instantly between themselves, so that if the state of the database changes or something in the server changes, the client can know immediately without needing to poll the server. And there are several ways that this can be done, of course, and I'll show you the entire process. But first of all, as you can see, I'm in a server.js file, and the first thing I want to do is I want to sort of bring in npm into the project, because to make this bidirectional communication work, we need to install a package called socketio. So I'll come here and I install socketio by saying npm install -- save, and this will of course be socket.io. There's another tool that I need to install as well, and this tool is called Express. You can use socketio independent of Express, but Express just makes things easier with using socketio, as well as since one of the most common packages for get and post request, and basically server creation in Node.js is Express. It just makes sense to use it together with Express, in this project. So I'm just going to type npm install, or before I do this, pardon me, I need to, of course, do an npm init-y to create my package.json. For those that caught it, my apologies. So npm init-y, this creates my package.json file. And as you can see here, this is what I have for now in my package.json. So I'm going to go ahead and install those packages I just talked about. So I'll type in npm install dash save socket.io and express. But press the enter button. It's going to go ahead and install these packages. It's in a couple of minutes it should be done, or seconds, like 5 seconds. So now I've installed the packages here, Express and socket.io. Cool. So we're one step closer. So let me go ahead and open my server.js file and start coding and start the server side implementation. So basically, I want to create the socket server and the socket client. The first thing I want to create, of course, is the socket server, which will be the server side of our app. And then after this, I'll create the client, which communicates with the server. So the first thing I want to bring in is express. So I can say const express equal to require express. And then I want to execute the express function here so that I can have an active app. And then for socket.io, this I need to create my socket server. So to do this, I'll just do const server is equal to require. Then there's this package that comes with Node.js HTTP package. And then this has a method called create server. And this takes in the app instance here. So bear with me. After we create this server, then we want to also bring in socket.io. So I can say const. Let me do that before I create the server, of course, or before I even instantiate the app instance. I'll write socket, or let me just write this as a capital socket is equal to require socket.io. Since this is the package we're going to use for the real-time communication, of course. And then I want to create a variable called io that uses socket and executes this socket function, and we have to pass in, of course, the server, right? And then we need to pass in some other options with this to allow our clients to communicate with the server that we're creating right now. And this is basically some CORS options, which determines what client URL can access our server, or in this case, our socket server. So I'll pass in the origin key, and I put star to indicate that we can receive requests from anywhere. But in a production application, you probably will want to limit this so that not everybody can have access to this socket server. And for methods, I want to pass in get and post. Awesome. So this creates our IO instance, and with this IO, we can use it to listen for when a client connects to the server. And just a reminder, this entire process is leading to this bidirectional communication between the server and the client. This IO instance that we create makes it possible for this communication to be established. And to listen for that connection from the server, from the client, you need to type in io.on connection. And this takes in a callback function, which executes once there is a connection from a client to the server. And this callback function takes in one argument called the socket, which is created basically once there's a connection between a client and a server. And this socket parameter here is unique to the client that is connecting to this server. It's important to note that every client that connects to this server has their own independent socket instance, just like every client sending a GET request to a server has their own request instance. More on that when we talk about Express in a later video. So in this particular instance, I want to console.log in this instance. Let me see, what can I console log? I can just say connected to, then I want to log the ID. And this simply means that every socket instance has a unique ID that comes with it. So I'm going to log in this ID, and when we see this console.log connected to whatever socket ID, it means that our client has actually initiated this bidirectional communication between the client and the server. Cool. So one more thing I want to do, since I'm actually incorporating this with an Express app, I would like to start an Express server as well. So I'll say let port equal, in this case, of course, let me call this 5000, and then I'll say just above the connection string, I'll say server dot listen to listen on the port 5000, and then after it listens, I want to console.log, of course, listening on port, then the ports that is listened on. Awesome. So let me just start the process, right? Before that, I want to go to my package.json file, and then yeah, it's already showing nodes. So I already did this in the past, I think. Let me just remove this test script, so you can see start is node server.js. Awesome. So I can just run npm start, since the start script is already executing the server.js file that we created. So let me just press enter. Awesome. So it's listening on port 5000, but obviously this line 21 listening on line 26, I mean, connected to socket ID is not running, and that's because we do not have a client that is connecting to this server port, this server socket, I mean to say. So in this instance, it's time to create a client, and I'm just going to do that really quickly by creating a new folder. I call this folder client, and inside the client folder, I want to create a couple of files. The first file will be index.html. The second file will be styles.css, and then I will create another file called index.js. And just a note, these are all client files. They have nothing to do with our server. So index.html is where we'll bring in our socketio client instance. And to get socketio client, I'm going to paste the URL here very soon. But let me just first of all create the HTML template, and I can do that by saying I think it's HTML5, then press tab. This works really quickly on VS Code because VS Code comes baked with Emmet that does this autocomplete type things for HTML files and any other file. So I want to bring in a link. You can get this by just saying socketio client CDN on Google, but to speed things up, I want to quickly let me just get it here. Awesome. I want to paste in this socketio URL, and this will enable us, this URL right here will enable us to use socketio on the client to communicate with our server. Again, you can get this by just going to, let me quickly see if I can open up something here. New window, of course. Then I want to just say socketio client CDN. then literally oops, not the first one, of course. The wherever you see client installation socketio, I think this is it, or maybe not. CDN, it's somewhere around here. Isn't the CDN website? I think it should be around here. Don't know why I can see it now, but it's definitely there. Anyway, I'll leave my code in the description below for you to get this URL. I don't know why I can't find where I got this from, but it's definitely in the internet from the cdnjs.cloudflare.com. I think it's the place to go. Yeah, I'll leave the link in the description below to get where you can get this link from. Okay, let us continue, and then I want to also create another script tag. This script tag will link to our own in-house index.js file here. Awesome. So in the body here, note how I put the script tag just below the last part, just below the body closing tag, and that's because I do not want this to need to load before our content loads. So it's important you put the script tag over here. Awesome. So yeah, so let me just type in a h1 here, just so we have some content on the page. I'll say chat app. Awesome. So yeah, for the title here, I'll also put chat app as well. Cool. So we're done with our HTML file, and for our index.js file, I want to quickly just console.log something so I can be sure that it's connected. No, not connected. I mean, like it's be sure that it's being referenced properly in our HTML file. So let me just log I'm here, just to be sure that it's connected properly. And then to run this, I'm gonna do something called open with live server. If I click on open with live server, and obviously to open with live server, you need to install live server, I think it's called. Yeah, you need to install live server on VS Code to have this feature, of course. So please make sure you use VS Code for this tutorial so that you can have this available. So if I right click and click on open with live server, you'll see that it opens this chat app with the live server. Perfect. So let me just right click this and inspect just to see if everything is going well. Let me make this a little bigger, of course. We can see that this log I am here is login, meaning that our index.js client JavaScript file is connected. Awesome. So to connect to our server socket.io, I'm just going to type in const socket is equal to io, and I know you're wondering where this io comes from. It's available because we are bringing in this socket.io CDN link here just above our index.js. If it is below, you won't have access to the io object. So right now, index.js is being called after this long CDN link. That's why we have access to our socket.io, to our io object that I'm calling here. So awesome. So inside this io, I want to type in the link of our server that currently has a socket listening for connections. So I'm going to type in HTTP. Then we're on localhost, and this is going to be localhost 5000 because we have our client, we have our server running on port 5000. So if I save this, you see that instantly you see a log at the bottom of the screen saying connected to then this long gibberish code here. Where is this long gibberish code coming from? It's coming from the fact that we have socket.id, and this ID is a unique identifier that connects our client to our server. And now we have successfully initiated our first client to server connection, which is pretty cool. So, and one cool part of socket.io is it works based on this event um, communication technology. So I can send an event, I can send a message to the server from the client telling it to listen to an event, and I can send a message from the client to the from the server to the client telling it as well to listen for an event. So I'm just gonna do something very similar to that, and I'm gonna come here, seeing that it's connected. I want to create, um, I want to emit a message. It's called emission of messages. So I'm gonna say socket dot emit, and this emit method here takes in a minimum of two arguments. The first argument is what you want the server to listen for, the event you want the server to listen for. I'm going to call this event ping, right? And I want to send some data. Let me just send an object that says message. Hi there, friend. Then on the server, I want, inside of this callback function, I want to listen for this ping event from the client. Note, this index.js is the client file. I'm going to the server to listen for the ping event. And to find the ping event, I'll say socket.on ping. This is telling our server socket.io to listen for a ping event. And in this instance, when the ping event is when the ping event occurs from the client to the server, this callback function is executed, and this argument taken here is the data that the client sends to the server. So I'll call this data, and then I'll console.log data. Then I'll also say from the ping event. I save this and save this as well. Of course, nothing happens, but when I restart the server and reload the page, of course, you see that I get message, hi there, friend, from the ping event, and this is being logged by the server. So you can see that there's this communication from the client to the server, and you can also communicate as well from the server to the client. This is, it's communicating from the server to the client can be a little tricky, and there are several ways to do that. That's why I have this info.txt file. This sort of describes a couple of ways that this can be done. I'm going to use a couple of these commands of communicating to the server, from communicating from the server to the client, but not every single thing, but I'm going to use most of it because I don't want this video to be like super long. I still have to build that project, of course. So yeah, right now I'm gonna send a message from the server to the client, and as I said, there are several ways to do that. Let me just give an overview of the different ways to do that. There's the first way, which means you're sending a message to all the clients connected to your server, right? The other way is sending a message to every single client except the client that has this socket object here. You know, this socket object is unique to a particular client. So sending to all clients except the sender implies if I get a request from this particular sender with this particular socket ID, I want to broadcast a message to all clients connected to this same server except the client with this particular socket instance. That's what socket, let me go to the info.txt again. That's what socket.broadcast does, right? I don't want to bore you guys to make you guys not understand all these. I want to do this in, we're gonna use these features in like when I'm building the app that I'm building right now. So I don't want to really confuse you guys with all these terms yet. So for now, let me just do something. I'm going to send a message to every single client connected. So to do that, I'll do io.sockets.emit, and I'm going to emit an event um, um, called message, and this will take in some data, of course. So it's basically the same way, just the difference is I want to use the IO object to all the sockets that are connected to my server and emit an event called message, and this message will be message I love you, right? Then I'll tell my client to listen to this message by saying socket dot on message, and then when the message is sent, it will when the message when the event of message is sent from the server to the client, this callback function is executed, and I'm going to console.log the data that's sent back, right? And let me just close the server and open it again. So it's connected, and you can see now that once I created the server, it automatically paired itself to the client and sent the message I love you. Awesome. So you can see that we are doing this bidirectional communication from server to client and client to server. Awesome. So I would like to start working on the application. I'm just gonna do some server work, and then I'll start off with the client design. Um, or I think I'll do the client design first. I think that's easier to understand things visually, just so we take it slow. Awesome. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to work on the design of this page, of course. I'll just do a bit of um, markup, not too complicated, but to make it look a bit good. So let me just quickly start off with that right now. Okay, the first thing I want to do is create a div that's that has a class of container, and then another div inside of this that has a class of chatbox. And as you can see here, I'm using emmet, which is pretty cool for situations like this. Just creating divs quickly with classes. So when I put dot and the name of the class and press tab, it's going to create this div. I'm going to be doing that a lot just to speed things up. So I want to create a UL that has an ID. So I press hash of message list. This is where the messages that are being sent by every user will appear. So it's a list of messages, and inside of this list of messages, there'll be LIs of messages. But I'm not going to do that yet. I'm not going to write that with HTML. I'm going to write that instead with JavaScript dynamically. So after I have this, then I want to have a form of class inputs. And inside of this form of class of input, I want to have an input there that has a placeholder equal to type your message, right? Let's see how that looks at the moment. So it's not much design here, but we'll add the designs very, very soon. So now that we have this, I want to have a button in here that says send. And this is a mistake. This is not a div. This is meant to be a form of class inputs. Let me quickly change that. It's a form, not a div of class input. Yeah. So below this, I want to have a break line below the chat box. Of course, I want to have a break line, a BR tag, and then another div under this with a class. With a class of active users. This div has a class of active users, and I want a h2 that has a text active users, and then a list with an ID of users, and this will have the dynamically created list of users. Awesome. Okay, so if we got this far, if you got this far, this is our current design. This is really nothing to write home about, but I want to quickly copy and paste the CSS um, of our current designs right now, because of course it's not a CSS class, so I really don't want to spend a lot of your time writing CSS. Just gonna paste. It's a really simple CSS. There's nothing too much to it. Just given a default font, certain I'm setting box size into border box, padding the margin to 0 pixels, setting a nav bar. I don't even need this nav bar. I'm just gonna take it out. There's no nav bar anyway, so just gonna save this, and then just giving some flex to the message list, giving a height to the chat box, of course, flex flow of column to the chat box, given a gray background and some border radius and some box shadow. Just basic styles that you'll probably understand if you have a fairly good background of CSS. There's no real overly great style here, right? Just I'll leave the link to the CSS file in the description below, so you don't need to worry about where to get the styles or how to write them. So if I save that and I save my index.html file again, reload the page. Oh, the styles are not being applied because I have not yet linked my CSS file to my HTML file. So let me come here and quickly do the linkage and say link styles.css and save this. You can see that I have yeah, it's pretty much, this is pretty much the design. There's really nothing much to this. Of course, I added some styles to the list of messages that you'll see here. And this chat app, let me just quickly give all H1s a text align of center to make it look a little better. So yeah, that's cool. So this is basically the app. It's really not that beautiful, but it helps. It does the job, you know. So just let's just take it like this for now. So this is the app we have. Awesome. So we have our CSS done. We have our HTML done. Hopefully we all followed up to this point. And now for the real work, which is our index.html, index.js, I mean. So I'm gonna work with the server initially, right? I want to add some things to the server to work on our chat app. So the first thing I want to add, of course, is I want to create a couple of listeners. The first listener I want to create is the message listener, right? When a message is sent, when user A sends a message to user B, I want to listen for a message. So I'll type in socket.on message, and I'm gonna listen for a message from the client. And when a message event is fired by the client and hits the server, this callback function is going to be executed with the message as an argument, right? So when a message comes from a particular user, I want to send this message to all the users in that are connected to the app that we're building right now. So I'll say io.sockets.emit. Then I want to emit another message to every single client from the server. I'll call this message underscore client, because this message is going to be listened for in the client. So I just want to add underscore clients to be shown that this message is listened for on the client side. And then I want to send message. So I'm going to send the message back in form of an object. we know that in ES6, if the key and the value have the same language, I should say, you can just take one out and have just the message there. So I'm gonna leave it like this, and then I'm gonna work. Okay, I'm gonna do it like this. I'm gonna work on the back end a little bit, then I'm gonna work on the front end. So going back to the index.js, I want to see how I can send this message to the back end. But before I do that, I want to clear all these test messages here, and then just do some DOM manipulation, DOM manipulations. So now that I've brought in my socket here, now that I've instantiated my socket here, I want to just do some fetching for all the items that are on this page. And this is just basic JavaScript, nothing to do with socketio. I'll just say const message form is equal to document dot query selector, and this would be dot chatbox form. This basically is just looking for this chat box here, and then I want to get the message list. This will be document dot query selector. Then this is going to be the ID message list in small letter L, and this message list is this UL here that we created, where all the messages will be appended to. Let's go on and look for more key DOM elements. User list is equal to document.query selector, and this will look for the UL list of users, which is again in the index.html file. Then I want to bring in the chat box input, which is document.query selector dot chatbox input, which is this the input here that will be doing the typing of the message. Of course, we want to keep track of that. And then const user add form. This hasn't been created yet, but we're gonna create it very soon. But since it hasn't been created yet, let me just leave it out. For the meantime, I'll leave it out. Let me see, what else can I do? Yeah, I think that's all for now. So I want to create something. I want to create message. I want to create event listeners for our input, which is our message input. So event listeners, and I'll say message form, which is the this is the form that is bounding around this input and button here. So I want to say message form dot add event listener, and I want to listen for a submit event. And when the submit event happens, ideally what I want to happen when I finish typing here and hit submit is I want the message the user types to be visible on the chat box here, that's exactly what I want. So let me just see how to make that happen now. Give me a sec. Okay, then this event listener here, I want this function to be executed whenever the submit event occurs. So I'll say message submit handler, and I'll create this function at the bottom here, a function declaration, so that some hoisting can be occurring in our app. So message submit handler, and it will take in the submit event, which I call E. And in order to prevent a page reload when a submit event is executed, I just need to do events.prevent default. Awesome. So what else do I have to do now? I'm gonna present default. Then obviously, after preventing the default event, I want to say let the message is equal to the value of the chat box input. No, not node value. And then when I get this value, I can leave some error checks and say if there is no message, meaning if it's left empty while you try to submit, just return an alert that says message must not be empty. Of course, you can do this in the backend as well, but just to make things easier, quicker, I'll do it just in the front end. And then if it is not empty, I'll just do socket.emit. I want to emit a message, the message event that holds the message, because I want all users to see that this message event has been emitted. So I'll send this message to the backend. And then when I send the message to the backend, I want to, of course, clear the chat box input, because when a message is sent, the chat box input needs to be cleared, right? It needs to be cleared after I hit enter or click on the send button. Awesome. So this is our entire message submit handler. So now that I have this down, let me just save this. And then I need to create another event to listen for when our server sends this message client back to our clients, because this event here, this sockets.emit is emitted to every single client. So I need to set up a listener for message client here. So to do that, I'll go back to my client index.js and say, just create a comment here called socket listeners and say socket.on message client. Just be sure that this message client here is the exact same thing as the one on server.js. So coming over here, I'll see that I want to execute a function whenever I get my messages, right? But for this to make sense, I want to keep track of all the messages that are in the state right now. I want to keep track of all the messages in state. So I'm going to create a message. Let me just call this small letters rather. A message array that keeps track of every single message that is sent by every single user, so that when a message is sent and I listen for this message client, I can then populate this message array here to keep track of all the messages. And of course, this message client has the message object, right? Or instead of calling this message, let me call this messages. I'm adding an S here, messages, so there's no conflict. So messages here. And this is for a message object. Notice this message object here is the same object that is being sent here, just to reiterate. So having the message object here, I want to call a function called update messages. This update messages will update all the messages in the UI, right? So before I call this update messages, I want to say messages, of course, messages dot push, and I'm going to push in this latest message object to this message array. Awesome. So of course I have not created this update messages yet, so I'm going to go to the bottom here, just close this one up a bit and say function update messages, and then this update messages will involve a bit of DOM manipulation. The first thing I want to do is I want to empty this message list that is here, right? I want this message, the message list elements to be emptied so that I can then repopulate it with all the messages with the new messages that have then appeared in this array after this push method has been called. So I'll say message list, which is the list of messages here, dot text content is equal to nothing, to empty it out completely. Then I'll create a for loop here and say for let I equal 0, I less than messages dot length because I want to loop through all the messages in the messages array, and then for every single message there, I want to concatenate an li element to the message list DOM element, the ul element. So it's a bit confusing, but if you follow me slowly, I'm sure you'll probably follow and understand what I'm doing. So message list dot inner HTML, follow me now, plus equal to, and then I'm going to type in backticks because I want to have some dynamic content in here, and say I want to concatenate an li for every point in the loop. And then I want to, let me close the li at the bottom. Close the li at the bottom. And then I want to have a p tag inside, and say, and also close the p tag as well. And this p tag, I want to then add a variable here. So I'll put the $, then 2 curly braces open and close, and I'll type in messages bracket I to get the particular message in this point of the loop, then dot message. Just like that's how the structure of the message object is. So you want to output that message in the p tag here. So we'll save this, and then our messages are pretty much going to be populated on the page. So let me quickly test this out. Before I test it out, let me reload my server, of course. npm start again. Cool, so no errors so far. As far as I can see, there are no errors. Everything is free of an error. So let me just send a message. Hey there, friend. You can see that hey there, friend is appearing here, and I can add multiple messages. How are you? Awesome. So to the ultimate test, to be sure that this is working on all browsers connected to this page, let me open a new browser here and just paste this here and type in here. I'll type in hi friend. You can see that hi friend is showing here. How are you? So you can see that this is what is happening here. It may be a bit confusing if you're new to this, but what is happening here is I'm sending a message from this client to the server. The client takes that message and says, oh, I'm gonna send this to everyone that is connected to me, the server. So it then does io.sockets.emit over here at line 31 to send to execute this event on every client connected to this server. I'm passing the message that is passed in from the front end of the sender in an object here. So it's sending this object, and on the front end, the object is being received here in the message client listener, and then it's being pushed to the messages array of everybody connected to the client to the server, and then the update messages function is called, which then empties the message list, then appends an li for every message in the message array, appends an li there for everybody that's connected. Awesome. So right now we have a real-time messaging app, but there's a problem here. The problem is we are not keeping track of the users that are connected. So how do we solve this problem? Then we need to start working on adding a user and deleting a user. To do this, if you remember how the finished app was, there is a modal that appears, the instance that somebody connects to this page. There's a modal that appears, right? That modal prompts the user to enter their username, and that's how we add the user to our socket connection and keep track of that user wherever, whether it's connected, whether it's not connected, we keep track that way, right? So How do we do that? The first thing I want to do is, I'll go from the easy part then to the technical part, right? The first thing I want to do is I will go to the index.html and I'll create that model here and say, let me just create, the first thing I want to do is, this will be outside the container. I'll come here and I'll say I want to create a backdrop. That backdrop black background you see that covered the entire screen. Then I want to create a modal. This modal will be a form of class modal, and there will be no action, of course. And inside of this modal, I want a h1 that has an ID of title and has welcome as the title, and I'll have a break line here just to make things nice and quick because the video is already approaching 50 minutes, and a p tag that has an ID of content, and this says enter your user name, and another break line, and I want to have an input that says, that a placeholder that says, please, just the same thing here, enter your username. Awesome. So then the final thing I want to have, after the break line, of course, then is a button here that says submit. So this is the whole design, right? This is the whole design for the modal. Let's see if that appears. You can see this appears and is styled properly because I actually styled this backdrop and modal in my CSS file. You can see the styles I gave it. I just gave it a black transparent background, position of fixed, full width and full height, and give it a high Z index and made it stick to the top and give it a cursor of pointer. Then I also added a class here called disappear, so that when the user enters the username and press enter, our JavaScript code can call the disappear on the modal. Awesome. So this just on both the modal and the backdrop. So this just makes this modal and backdrop disappear after I type in submit. That's not done yet, of course, because I haven't added that JavaScript logic yet. But I'm going to do that fairly quickly. So just make sure you have the CSS file pasted here. So let's just go ahead and add that logic to both the back and the front end. So on my index.js front end, the first thing I want to do is I want to let me see. I think I'll start with the backend first. I want to keep track of the users list, right? So going to the backend, I want to create an array called users, right? Create an array called users, and this array will be keeping track of all the users that are currently connected to the server. And how do we keep track of all the users connected to our server, right? So we want to listen for an event called add user being sent when the user submits, clicks on submit here to enter the username. An event should be executed in real time that then adds this username, of course, to our socket instance. And how do we add the username to our socket instance? Remember the very first thing I said, not the very first thing, but one of the first things I said, that this socket here is unique to a particular computer that's connected, or a particular client that's connected to our server. So it means that we can then store this user as, we can then add a new property as we please to indicate the current state of the connected user. So in this instance, I'm going to say socket.user. I'm going to add a brand new property. Remember, this socket is an object with a bunch of properties, and we are free to add properties to it as well. So I'm going to say socket.user is equal to username. And then after I add this socket.user, after I add this new user property here, and you soon see the importance of adding the property, it's so we can keep track of when the user gets disconnected. After I add this username to the socket property, I want to say users.push username, right? I'm going to push the user that is being sent to our list of users, right? And then when that is done, I want to say io.sockets.emit. I want to emit to every single connected user our current list of users, so that that UI always holds an updated list of users. That sounds cool, right? Okay, awesome. So that is the whole logic. That's the whole logic of the add user functionality. But there's one more thing I want to add. I want to add in this message client emission here, I want to add another property, which is the user that sent this message, right? It's no point to send a message without knowing who sent it, right? So I'm going to add another property called user, and this user will be socket.user. Why? Because we already kept track of the user that sent the message, which is the one that has this socket here, the socket that is being maintained, the socket that is communicating the message basically. So when a message comes from the front end to the back end, it has this socket object which is unique to the computer that's connecting to the back end, and also it then has this user property here, which is set before the user could even send a message on our page. That way we know what user is sending what message, and you'll see this in action very soon. So yeah, so this is the only change I'm going to make to this. I'm going to add a user and socket the user. So I'm going to come into the front end here. I want to add a submit event listener for when I click on the submit button here for adding a brand new user. How do I do that? Under my event listeners here, I'll say, even before that, I need to bring in my user add form. So I say const user add form, which is the form that is the modal of our setup here, is equal to document.query selector, and it will be .modal, right? And I'll say const backdrop to bring in our backdrop so we can make it disappear when we need it to. So document.query selector, and this would be .backdrop. Awesome. And then finally our inputs equal to document.query selector .modal and the input inside the modal. Awesome. So now we have captured the key elements on our page, and then we want to listen for the submit event. So user add form .add event listener submit, and of course we want to have a user add handler. So this will be a function declaration at the bottom. Function. I'm just going to call this functions. So on the user add handler, which is going to take in an argument, the event argument. The first thing we want to do, of course, is to do e.prevent defaults to prevent a page reload. Then we'll say the let's username is equal to user add input that value, and I'll say if there is no username passed in, of course we do not want this. We want to return an alert. You must add a username, right? And then if there's a username, then we want to say socket.emit And we want to emit this add user event, which has the username. And then once the event is emitted, of course, we want to make the user add form disappear. And how to make it disappear? If you remember very well, I already set up this disappear class, I mean to say, on both the modal and the backdrop here. So the modal and the backdrop needs to have this disappear class set in the CSS for anything to really happen with regards to making the modal and the backdrop disappear. So I'm just going to do a class list dot add in this instance, and I'm going to add a particular class called disappear. If I can spell, I think I spelled it correctly. Awesome, disappear. I'm also going to make the backdrop disappear as well by adding the same command for the backdrop. Awesome. So now these will disappear once that is done, right? Awesome. So now when the user is added, there's one more thing I want to do. When the user is added here in our server, we're going to emit users, right? So we need to listen for this users event on our client as well. So to make this work, I also need to keep a client list of users. This is a client list of users right now. And what is going to happen here is I'm just going to say socket.on. I'll listen for the users event. And this will take in the users from the back end. I note I call this underscore users so as not to create a conflict with our users here. And then I'll quickly say our users here is equal to our underscore users coming from the back end here, the server here. So we're basically sending all the users that are on our app from the back end to the front end, as simple as that. And then I want to call another function called update users. So this function, I have not created this function yet, but this is the final function I'm going to create, I promise. So in this function, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to say, let me just minimize this. It's going to be kind of similar to the update messages function, but I don't want to make it too similar. I want to just, teach you guys some new things along the way, and say, update users. So the first thing I want to do is I want to clear my user list, which, if you remember, is our list UL list of users here. I want to clear that user list and say user list dot text content is equal to nothing, right? Then I'll have another for loop. Let I equal 0, I less than users dot length in this case. And this users represents our client users. So users dot length. Then I plus plus. Then inside of this, I want to do a couple of things, right? I don't want to use the same curly brace method. I just want to show you a different method, So in this method, I'm just going to say, I'm going to create a node, an li node, a list node. So I'm going to do document.create elements. To create an element is going to be a capital letter li. That's not a list, a regular list, right? Then I'm going to create a text for that list. So I'll say let text node is equal to document.create text node. And this text node will be the actual user that we're that is in our array. So this is going to be the text inside of the li. Awesome. So now I want to do a node.append child text node. This adds our text inside of the li. And then finally, I'm going to do a user list. It's obviously needs to be okay. It's gonna be inside this for loop as well. So user list dot append child, and that'll be the node. Awesome. So what we've done now is create a way to update our users on our UI whenever this user event occurs. It updates the users list on every connected client. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I want to add one more front end change to our update messages. Since we have changed our message object in the back end to also take in the user object, which is going to be socket.user, which is the sender, to show who the sender of the message is, we're going to come here and basically add another p tag. In this case, it will be users, it will be messages square bracket I dot user. This will show the user of the message, and I can save this. That is exactly what will happen. So there's one final thing I need to work on, and that is what happens when the server disconnects. Or before I do that, let me just show you how the page is looking like so far. So as you can see here, this is what we get. Let me quickly reload this page, reload the server. Awesome. Let me reload the page, reload both pages. Awesome. Then I want to add a user. I'll say this user is called Deba. If I press the enter button, I have a bug. Odd. Let me quickly debug this. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. I just realized where the error came from. Instead of submit, I wrote sub empty. I must put the I here. So it should work now, theoretically. So if I type in Deba and press enter, it works, but now there's an issue. It's not actually making the user appear. So what I'll do now is I'll just basically try and see if I can debug this. It should be something easy to debug. Add user, add user here. Then if I go to the server, let me look at this. So I got to add user, username, emit users. Okay, I've seen the error. It's I'm trying to reassign to a constant variable, which is probably a bad idea. So I should have called it a let instead of a const users. These errors happen in programming, so it's common to have these errors. So going back here, I found to add Deba. You can see that I've already added Deba multiple times in the server, so it gave me all the instances of the Deba that I added. So that's why it's like this. So let me just reload the server and then try to add someone. I want to add Clem. So you can see that Clem is being added, and I can come here and I can add Philip. Philip is being added as well. Awesome. So if I come in here and say, hey, my friends, press the enter button, you can see that I have Clem here and hey, my friends as the body of the message. And this is because I'm keeping track of the user that is sending this particular message. I'm keeping track of that user in real time, right? So I can come here and say, I am good. And you can see that Philip says I am good on this browser and on Philip's browser as well. So this is really cool because you can see that we have real-time communication. This can be an app you can just make for you and your friends just to communicate with each other. So this is all good and all, but watch what happens when I try to close this browser. You can see that Philip still appears as an active user. Meanwhile, Philip has been disconnected from our server. Now, how do we make sure that when Phillips gets disconnected, that we make sure to also remove his name from our active users list? Well, that is easy. I can come here to server.js. Then I have to listen for another event. It's called socket.on. It's called the disconnect event, right? Disconnect. So when Philip or any other user when their socket instance gets disconnected, meaning when they close their browser or they lose internet connection, this callback function will be fired, will be executed, right? So what is going to be inside of this callback function? First thing I want to do, of course, is I want to say, I just want to log that we are disconnecting, right? Then I want to, since I'm keeping track of the user that's getting disconnected, I want to log out that user, socket.user. This is why we are keeping track of that user. We want to log out what user is being disconnected from our server. One more thing I want to add is, if by some chance we don't log out the user, we don't keep track of the user in the socket instance, I want to say if socket.user, right? Just to make sure to only execute this function when there is a user linked to the socket object, the socket instance. Then I want to remove the user, aka Philip, that is getting disconnected from our server. So I'll say users, referencing our users array here. So I want to use this mutation function, which mutates the array directly. In the real world, you'll probably be using some database to remove the user from being an active user on the page or something similar to that, instead of just having this large users array. But this is just a small project, so it's okay for now for tutorial sake. But in a large distributed system, you probably want to use a database like MongoDB or SQL or whatever. I'll release tutorials on that very soon. But in this instance, I want to delete socket.user from our users array. To do that, I'll say users.splice be users.index of socket.user, which is the user that is connected to socket again. And then I'm going to get the index to delete of the array, and I want to delete only one item in this index. If I put 2, it's going to delete this item and then another item after this user. But that's not what I want, so I'm going to only delete one item, which is going to be this index, away from this users array. Awesome. And we are sure that this index is going to be available because whenever we set socket.user, we are also pushing the user into the users array. And now this will keep track of when a user gets disconnected or not. So after we do this, we want to, of course, say run io.sockets.emit to show every client the new updated users list, right? Then I'm going to log something else here just to show the remaining users in our server, connected to our server. This is just a log just for me to keep track of what is going on in the server. So, and that is all, basically. So let me just reload the server, run npm start again, and then let me just create a brand new page. And I want to add a user here, Clem, and another person, Joe. And you can see Clem and Joe were added to the server. I can still text Joe and say, hey Joe, what up? Right? And I can text back and say, I'm good, brother. So this still works, but now watch what happens when I, Joe, leave the close my browser. You can see that Joe gets removed from our active server list, because what happens is when we remove the user from our users array, we then emit the updated user list to our client. This event, the users event, we execute this user event on every client connected to our server. And then in this event, it first of all sets the updated list of users to our client users. and then calls the update users function, which then clears all the users in the users list, then updates the UI by creating a brand new list tag, adding each user to the new list tag by running the append child function, append child method. Then we then append the node that has been created with and populated with the text into the user list. So this is done for every user, and this way we are able to keep track of when a user is connected and when a user is disconnected. So I can come in here and I can come in here again as Jane, and I can come in here again as Jonathan. Let me just copy and paste this and say Jonathan, actually, not the text, Jonathan. And I can text this Jonathan and say, hey there, how are you? This is Jane. So this is Jonathan here. This is Jane replying, and I can leave as Jonathan. See, Jonathan is gone. I can leave as Clem. Clem is gone. And now it's only Jane. And of course I can leave as Jane, but I won't leave as Jane yet because I don't want to I don't want a situation where I'll have to reopen the browser again. But you get the point. So basically, this is all done. We have a really active chat application. Of course, this is not a sort of scalable application. This is just showing you how to make a really detailed version of socketio. I'm just showing you how to make use of socketio, just for a mini project. But in the future, I'm going to release a tutorial on a more detailed project using MongoDB, creating different chat rooms and what have you, because there's still a lot more to to talk about socketio, like how to be like a really expansive platform. But for now, this is the whole tutorial. This is just what I want to show you guys. I hope you like this type of content, and I hope you learned a lot from this video. Yeah, so that's it. So please, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, please subscribe, because that really helps. And yeah, let's have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week ahead. Bye.